Hello and welcome to another Magic 2015 gameplay. Today we're taking a look at Naya Midrange, a well-balanced deck featuring good creatures, a decent removal, and just a little bit of ramp in between. So let's dive right into it, starting with two reprisals, which are very good in the late game, being able to deal with the opponent's biggest creatures, and also being an instant is very valuable. Then we have a Brimaz, which is very good against any type of aggro deck by being able to provide a lot of chump blockers and also being able to kill quite quickly, so it's a must answer threat. Won't always be able to cast him on turn 3 in this deck because we don't run a ton of white lands, but still quite good in the late game. And then Baneslayer Angel, which is pretty much a staple in any white deck, so I won't discuss too much. Then we have Banefire, which is good early game removal, and in the late game you can simply point this at the opponent's face and burn them out. Then we have Anger of the Gods, which can often be set up to provide a lot of advantage by sweeping the opponent's board. If they aren't prepared for it, it can be a pretty big blowout. And you can often set it up so that you don't lose any of your creatures to make it even better. So a very high potential card. And then we also have Ogre Battle Driver, which gives creatures +2/+0 and haste when they enter the battlefield, so combines very well with all our expensive creatures. Being able to give them haste and +2/+0 when they enter the battlefield means we're pretty much a turn ahead of our opponent and are favored to win the race. And it's a very scary card when it's on the other side of the battlefield, because you don't know what might be attacking you the following turn. Then Stormbreath Dragon is pretty much the red equivalent of Baneslayer Angel, so just an excellent card. Same goes with Inferno Titan, which can be used as a removal spell by killing the opponent's small creatures, and on every attack step you can do the same. And he also happens to kill quite quickly by being able to pump him up with his fire breathing ability. Then we have Wild Nacatl, not the full amount because I think it's not as good as it would be in a paper constructed format where you have dual lands, but we have to deal with gates which don't have the mountain or plains card type, so we have to pretty much fetch our basic lands with cards like Cultivate to make our Wild Nacatl better, but it's still quite good in a late game, only spending 1 mana for a 3/3. And it also works with a Garruk's Pack Leader, which we'll see in just a bit. So while it's not broken in this deck, it's still quite good. So I'll definitely play 3 of them. Then we have Elvish Visionary, which helps smooth out our draws by being a 2-drop that can block an attack. Works well with Ogre Battle Driver, having a 3/1 haste for 2 mana that draws a card is quite good, and just helps our overall game plan. Then we have Cultivate, which is our only ramp card, but it's a very powerful and a very important one, being able to fix our mana by grabbing the appropriate lands, and also putting one on the battlefield means we'll get to our big creatures faster, which is all we want to do. Speaking of big creatures, there's Arbor Colossus, a 5 mana 6/6 with reach, meaning he can block the omnipresent Baneslayer Angel, and his monstrosity can kill the Baneslayer Angel should that be necessary. Just a very large creatures that can kill quite quickly as well. Then Garruk's Pack Leader is probably the build around me card in this deck, as it's a 4/4 for 5 that draws a card whenever a creature with power 3 or greater enters the battlefield. And you know what, playing big creatures is good. If you get a extra card for them, it's even better. So a very powerful draw engine in this deck. Then we have Plaka Worm, which is a great curve topper, gaining us 7 life, putting us out of burn range, and also having trample is a nice addition. Very scary if you play this with a Ogre Battle Driver in play. Then Woolly Thoctor is another tricky to cast but very powerful card. A 5/4 for 3 mana. Even if we just play this on turn 4, it's still quite powerful. And also obviously triggers the pack leader. And then we have Ground Assault as another removal spell, which works very well with Cultivate, as we are putting more lands into play. Then our mana base, we have 3 Shrines, and then the full amount of Guild Gates as well. 2 Boros Guild Gate and 2 Selesnya, because red and green are our main colors and we don't want to have too many tapped lands. And then 7 forests, 3 mountains and 2 plains. And here you can see our curve and our color distribution. We have a little bit of a hole at the 4-drop slot, but then we can simply play a 3-drop followed by a tapped land, which is also a good use of a turn. So let's jump into a game, shall we? Rightio, let's take a look at our opener, which looks pretty spot on. So we'll keep it. We have good mana and some Elvish Visionaries to help out. Let's lead with Boros Guildgate. So next turn we can go Forest into Mystic, or Visionary I should say. Elvish Mystic is a green elf in Standard right now, so causes some confusion. Opponent leads with a Selesnya Guildgate, which is the green-white gate. Alright, we draw a Jungle Shrine, but we'll still go ahead and play the Visionary here. See what we draw. And an Anger of the Gods, which is good, but not if we're planning to play the second Elvish Visionary. But if our opponent's playing, for example, green-white tokens, then it could be very good. But looks like our opponent is on the banned colors, green, white and blue. And there's a third Visionary, so let's just play one first to see what we draw. Opponent casts a Raise the Alarm, which is fine. Probably should have waited until our attack step. But if our opponent played it right here, I'm not sure if our opponent's gonna block with them. But regardless, we don't really mind losing the Elvish Visionaries. So let's play the Jungle Shrine and attack. If our opponent blocks, that's fine. If he doesn't, then that's also fine. We'll probably tell what our opponent's up to. So our opponent blocking probably means he's not really trying to be an aggressive deck and doesn't mind to go into the late game. So could play Raise the Alarm just to get a few chum blockers and is perhaps a control deck. And now also play the Swamp, so could be pretty much anything. Alright. Another Guild Gate. We do have a pack leader in hand, which we'll play followed by a Baneslayer Angel if they resolve. But here we can just play another Visionary, see what we draw, and go from there. Alright, another Guild Gate which we'll play, but let's attack first. Now that we played the other Visionary, our opponent's probably more likely to block. And he does. That's good, clearing the path for our creatures. And I don't think it matters, but let's play a Gruul Guild Gate. Our mana base is pretty much able to cast any spell we draw. Alright, opponent plays a Plains. And is he gonna play anything? He's not. Could have an instant speed draw spell to still make use of his mana, but I don't think we have to worry about any counter spells, as those for creatures are double blue. So let's go ahead and play the pack leader and attack with our Visionary. Reprisal, alright. So our opponent does have an answer for the pack leader, but that just means he's less likely to have one for Baneslayer Angel, which, while it doesn't draw cards, does kill the opponents faster. So there's that. Let's see what our opponent's up to. Could play Zone Baneslayer Angel, theoretically, but he doesn't, and he's stuck on 4 lands, which is good news for us. Let's go ahead and attack here to see if our opponent perhaps has another Raise the Alarm, for example. And instead it's a Voyage's End, which seems pretty unnecessary if you're gonna use it on a Visionary, since that just draws us a card. And it also means we can now try and resolve a Baneslayer Angel. Opponent could have a second Reprisal, but I guess we'll find out. Doesn't look like it. Does he have a 5th land, or is he gonna stay on 4 for a while? Looks like it. And there's another pack leader. Convenient. I don't think there's a reason to play the Visionary here, so let's go ahead and attack and try and play the pack leader. There's a Divine Verdict, which is an unusual card as it's not very efficient at 4 mana. But I guess it did the job there. But here we can just play the pack leader and hope to get some card advantage out of it. And let's see if our opponent decides to play something, or if he's gonna beat a control deck. Did find a 5th land, but it's a tapped one. So could easily have another Divine Verdict here. So I think that's reason enough to play this pack leader in our first main phase. But first, actually, let's play the Visionary, in case the card we draw affects our play. It's just a land. So I think we'll play the pack leader now, which resolves and draws a card. Of course we do. Alright, I don't feel too bad attacking and getting Divine Verdicted here, as we do have another one. And there it is. Okay, and let's just play a Guildgate and pass. We still have a ton of big creatures left in our deck, and our opponent already used 2 Divine Verdicts and a Reprisal. And he's still gonna say go. Alright, so could still have another removal spell here. There's no reason to play the Battle Driver in our first main phase, as he doesn't have haste himself, but we could play him just to draw a card with the pack leader, of course. The opponent does have double blue up, which could be a Dissolve, countering the Battle Driver. But we don't really have anything other going for us. So, just in case our opponent has another Divine Verdict, I think it's okay playing the Battle Driver first here. And it's a Nullify, which counters our Battle Driver as well. But that's actually fine, since there's bigger creatures we would rather resolve. And now our opponent's unlikely to be able to remove the pack leader. Let's play the gate and attack. Alright, that all works. Our opponent takes 5 down to 14. And we have to say go here. I don't think our removal spells are gonna be a factor in this game, because our opponents might just be relying on a big win condition like Kozilek to close out the game. But actually, I guess we can still kill a Kozilek with the Ground Assault. So probably the Anger of the Gods is not gonna do too much though. But that's fine, we put it in our deck in order to beat the super fast aggro decks, or to gain a lot of advantage in a mid-range mirror match. And this is not one of them, but that doesn't mean that Anger of the Gods doesn't belong in our deck. Opponent using Traveler's Amulet to get a mountain, so it's got all the colors now. Could be casting a 5-color card next turn, for all we know. But says go for now, looks like. And there's another Anger of the Gods, which now can double up with his body to sweep the board for 6 damage. But let's just attack for 5 here. And hope to draw some action soon. But for now, we'll have to say go. Opponent's got 6, possibly 7 lands this turn. So could do some nasty things. And there's a Denrova Horror, which is fine. I mean, it returns our pack leader and we discard an Anger. But we can just play it again. I don't know if we wanna use the Ground Assault on the Horror. There's a Brimaz, which works well with the pack leader. Let's see, 5. So we can't quite cast the Anger, the Brimaz and the pack leader unless we happen to draw a land off of the Brimaz coming into play. But I think I wanna try doing that, just in case we get to attack with the Visionary, our opponent blocks it, and then we can kill the Horror with our Anger of the Gods, which would not be a bad use of the card. So let's see, we want to leave up 2 red. So I think this works. And now let's play our Brimaz. And hope to draw a basic land. Or just another good card would also be good. Alright, can't complain. But this does mean we don't get to attack here, as I don't really want to use my Ground Assault on a 4/4. I think there's bigger creatures we have to worry about. So, the ball's in our opponent's court, but we do have another creature that will draw us a card off of pack leader. So, let's see what our opponent can do about it. There's a Triplicate Spirits, which is a decent card, but a weird inclusion in a 5-color control deck. But now I think our Anger of the Gods is gonna get a lot of value. Let's see here. Think we play the Thoctor, as it doesn't die to our own Anger of the Gods. Yes, please. Alright, so we could Ground Assault and Anger of the Gods and then just attack for 8, which puts our opponent pretty close to dead. But I think if we can get more value out of this Anger of the Gods, that would be nice. That would require our opponent blocking our Visionary with the Horror, but I don't think that's gonna happen, as he will likely wanna block one of our bigger guys. So actually, I think Ground Assaulting is not the worst idea. In that case, if we're gonna Ground Assault, we might as well play the Visionary first, in case we draw something like a Reprisal that we would rather use. Instead it's another land. So yeah, let's just Ground Assault this. And I don't hate angering here to put our opponent dead to any point of burn. Does mean we lose our Elvish Visionaries we just played. Close call. I think we go for it. Might seem a bit like a waste now that we played a Visionary, but if our opponent's at 1, then any Banefire off the top is gonna be lethal, and our opponent would have to kill all our creatures the following turn with a Planar Cleansing, for example. Looks like our opponent doesn't have an answer, but we'll find out. Has to go planes into Planar Cleansing pretty much. Does he have it? We'll find out in the next episode. Alright, it's just an Angelic Edict, but that's not gonna be good enough. And let's play another Thoctor just to see what we draw. Yes, please. There's a Stormbreath Dragon, which is not a bad draw, but it's a little bit of overkill at this point. So let's put the opponent out of his misery and attack with everyone. And that's a pretty neat board state. So our opponent had a Resolute Archangel in hand, which would have been another way to stabilize. But I think if we drew Stormbreath Dragon, that would also been able to kill the opponent quite quickly. Alright, let's take a look at our opening hand, which is not that great. 2 lands, no ramp, and a lot of 6 and 7 drops, so I think I'll mulligan. Alright, not that much better, but a little bit. At least we have a Battle Driver. That's a realistic card we can play early. And it's not bad if you have Battle Driver into Plaka-Wurm. Do need to draw another land, and then some more lands for the Plaka-Wurm and Arbor Colossus. Alright, so if our opponent's playing an aggressive deck, then Anger of the Gods can help. But blue and black are not really known for being aggressive colors. But you never know. Let's see what our opponent plays here. And no 2-drop. Could still have a draw spell active. I guess we'll find out soon. And alright, so no Think Twice. Now has double blue up, so could have a Dissolve available. Looks like he's thinking about possibly playing something here. Alright, we found our 4th land. So while we could run into a counterspell here, I think we kind of have to play the Battle Driver, because we also want to resolve our other creatures, and those might get countered as well. Alright, so there's the Dissolve, making our opponent scry 1. So he can look at the top card and put it on the bottom if he doesn't like it. So we need to draw a 5th land for this pack leader. But if our opponent's a control deck, we will have some time to draw into it. Opponent did not miss any land drops yet, and plays a Kraken Hatchling, which I can only assume is in there to block, as it's a pretty good defensive creature. Opponent also left up 3 mana, could be a removal spell like the Edict effect, but we can't play anything, and Anger of the Gods does not kill a Kraken Hatchling, so we'll have to say go here. Five lands and Inspiration in the main phase. Should be played at instant speed, but probably means our opponent doesn't have a counterspell available then. And that's the benefit for us here, as we can just play a pack leader, which could die to our opponent's Edict, or some other removal spell, but we did get to resolve it, so a small moral victory there. Opponent could have a 6th land here. And there's the Tribute to Hunger I was talking about. So we have to sacrifice our pack leader. Our opponent gains 4 life. But we have another one. Opponent could have another counter spell here. If our opponent has a negate, he can counter Cultivate. If he has the other counter spell, which I can't quite remember the name of, he can counter one of our creatures, so he could counter the Colossus or a pack leader. Given that he's more likely to have the one that counters a creature, I would rather run out the Cultivate here and hopefully not run into a negate. Doesn't look like it, so let's get some green sources. And I guess, I don't know if we have double white, but I guess we'll get just more green, as you can't really go wrong with that. We already have double red, but we can just say go here, and then next turn trying to resolve a Plaka Worm. That would not be bad. So our opponent could still have one of those counters for our creatures. Let's see what he does here. Just says go, so it's very likely he has a counter spell up now. So let's see, what do we want our opponent to counter? 8 lands. Think we'll lead with a Arbor Colossus, which I'm okay if our opponent counters, as the pack leader and Plaka Worm I think are gonna give us a bigger advantage. And the card I was talking about is called Nullify. So unfortunately we can't play a second creature. This is a point where having something like a Wild Nacatl can come in handy, as it can still be played here and put some pressure on the opponent. Of course our opponent also has a Kraken Hatchling in play, which has done nothing so far. And there's a Soul of Ravnica, which we do have to deal with, as it can draw our opponent 2 cards a turn here at some point. Well, right now it's only 1, but now we do get to resolve a Plaka Worm, and let's play the Plains first and leave up all possible color combinations. So if we draw into a Reprisal somehow, if our opponent kills the Plaka Worm, we can still use it on a soul. So right now if our opponent has 7 mana, which he does, he can use this to draw 1 card. So it's not that great yet, but if he plays some black creatures, then it could be good. And there's a card I haven't seen. Thassa's Bounty, draw 3 and mill 3. And he mills 2 lands and a Scorpion. So that's probably the first time I've seen this card played online. I mean, it does draw 3 cards, but at 6 mana you sort of expect something better. And there's a Ground Assault for the soul, but let's attack first. Perhaps our opponent wants to trade an Ulcerate for this Plaka Worm. And he does not have an Ulcerate, I'm pretty sure then. Not really a card I would expect in a control deck anyways. But I think we can try and play the second Plaka Worm and also kill the Soul of Ravnica, which didn't attack last turn, which I find surprising. Perhaps he was worried about some haste creatures coming out. Alright, land number 8. Opponent could very well have a Kozilek in hand. Instead, Assassinate kills our Plaka Worm, but does draw us a card. And Flesh to Dust kills our second worm. So hopefully we draw into some creatures here. 2 lands. But we still have a draw step left. And a Banefire, which is not bad, but pretty far away from burning out the opponent. But luckily we still have a pack leader, which can do some great things. Could also die here, but there's not much we can do about it. I don't think holding it in hand and then trying to play it and then a second creature just to draw a card is a good idea if our opponent has counterspells in hand. A Denrova Horror is fine, as we can just discard a Guildgate. Think Anger of the Gods could still be useful. Of course, a land plus Banefire means an extra point of damage, but I think the Anger of the Gods is still slightly more important than an extra land. So let's see if it's a creature, and it is. So now we can play the pack leader and follow it up with a Thoctor. Alright, of course we do. And there's another Banefire. So let's see, we have 2 and then 8 lands, so 10 lands, so we can do 9 and 9, which is exactly enough to burn out the opponent in 2 turns. And if X is 5 or more, it can't be countered or prevented. So unless our opponent has another of those Tribute to Hungers to gain some life, we should be able to Banefire out the opponent. Alright, there's a Ground Assault. So actually, given that, let's think about this. So our opponent did not use a Tribute to Hunger in his turn, instead elected to play the Gargomozoa, but I think if he had one of those tributes he would have played it. Could still play it now, of course, as it's an instant. I think we Ground Assault the Horror here. This could punish us if our opponent has a Kozilek. Opponent has a Dissolve instead. Alright. In this case, if we attack with both, our opponent can trade the Horror for the pack leader, which I don't think really benefits us. So let's say go here and hope to draw some more creatures next turn, so the Tribute to Hunger doesn't get us. We still can very much Banefire out the opponent, but I want to try and play around a Tribute to Hunger wrecking us, as if we are a little more patient, we could get a secure win. Our opponent uses the Soul from the graveyard to draw 2 cards, since he has a blue and black permanent. So only left 4 lands untapped. And does he have another play here? He's thinking about it. Does he attack? He doesn't. And he says go. Alright. I don't really want to attack here. So I guess we'll just play the Banefire. It's for 10, so even if our opponent has a Tribute to Hunger, he would gain 4. So going back up to 11, so then any land we draw would be lethal. Opponent can't counter the Banefire, so has to go all the way down to 7. Not attacking, since we could still get some card draw out of this pack leader. So it's pretty much the opponent that has to find a way to gain life here. Plays a Scorpion, which is fine. Archaeomancer that can get back the Tribute to Hunger. Let's see if our opponent gets it or goes for a Dissolve instead. Goes for the Tribute, so our opponent's back at 11. Decides to play it now. It's equal to the creature's toughness, so I think I'll sack the Thoctor since the back leader can still draw some cards. Alright, there's a tapped land, so I think we can play an Anger of the Gods now to clean away all the little guys here, and this should resolve. Alright. We could attack and offer the trade, but I don't think that's really in our benefit, as this Banefire is lethal next turn. So a way our opponent can get out of this is having another Tribute to Hunger, or a way to get one back. Doesn't look like it, otherwise he would have used it and attacked. There's a Mountain just to make sure, and that's gonna be a Banefire for 12, targeting the opponent, and this should be good. Dissolve does not counter it, I'm afraid, so our opponent can use it, but it won't get countered, and there we go. I wanna thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this gameplay, and as always, have a nice day.